Legris disappeared almost the instant Desmond Lawcroft exited the hall. Only 2 evaluators remained, the same ones who had overseen both the first and third tests. It appeared their final role today was to assign us to our dormitories. "Girls, this way," the woman instructed. I gave her a small smile, remembering our earlier exchange. Her head turned toward me as if sensing my gaze. Our eyes met briefly, just long enough for her to offer a faint smile of her own before she briskly turned away and began organizing the girls who approached her. As expected, the man took charge of the boys. Once everyone had gathered, I gave a quick count. 34 girls stood in their line, fewer than us, just as I had suspected. The man introduced himself as Klaus Tallman and directed us through a nearby door. I noticed the girls being led in the opposite direction, confirming the dorms were gender separated. The moment we stepped closer, a brilliant light spilled through the threshold, making it almost impossible to see. I could feel mana vibrating in the air, thick and palpable. This was teleportation magic. I was right. As soon as we passed through, reality seemed to dissolve. The world around us faded, and I felt weightless, like I was being carried away by an unseen force. It was unsettling, yet oddly serene. Then, just as suddenly, it was over. I opened my eyes to a breathtaking scene. Gasps and murmurs of wonder echoed around me. Everyone was captivated. Above us, the sky stretched wide and open, painted with the deepening hues of twilight. The crisp breeze tugged gently at my hair, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh grass. We stood on verdant plains, surrounded by bursts of color from blooming flora. In the distance, the academy revealed itself. Towering structures made of elegant stone and metal gleamed under the fading sun. Some buildings looked like they came from another world entirely. "Enough gawking. Head to your dorms," Klaus barked, snapping us out of our trance. With a casual flick of his fingers, space behind him twisted. A tall building shimmered into existence as if materializing from the air itself. It was massive, imposing in size and scale. The sheer length of it forced us to turn our heads to trace its breadth, and its height seemed to pierce the sky. "This is your temporary residence until orientation ends. Once we evaluate your abilities, you'll be sorted into your respective classes and meet your seniors." We all understood the implications. I didn't expect to stay with the more talented students for long. "Well then, shall we find your rooms?" There were 66 of us boys, and the dormitory had more than 100 rooms, meaning we each got our own space. As Klaus led us inside, he explained several things. First, the dormitory was cloaked in magic, hidden from plain sight until revealed. That explained why we hadn't seen it earlier. Second, we were each assigned a schedule for the week-long orientation. "You'll find your timetables on your beds," Klaus informed us. Interestingly, no keys were needed for the rooms. Somehow, they were magically bound to each student. Could it be tied to the mana imprint we provided on our forms? I wondered. Klaus didn't elaborate, leaving the mystery unresolved. Finally, I was shown to my room. "Ha ha," I exhaled heavily, collapsing onto the bed. The soft mattress welcomed me like a long-lost friend. My entire body sank into it, and the fatigue I'd been suppressing all day surged forward in waves. "I've never been this drained before," I muttered. Not physically, but mentally. The pressure of maintaining appearances, staying composed, and fending off the stares of others was utterly exhausting. Thankfully, no one tried to speak with me during the walk. Even Stefan, who kept casting curious, competitive glances, had the sense to hold back. Good. "I'm not in the mood for more interaction," I sighed internally. My social energy was gone. I needed time to reset. After a few minutes of rest, I opened my eyes and took in the room. It was simple, but clean and thoughtfully arranged. A study desk and chair sat by the window, a wardrobe stood against one wall, and a counter rested near the bed. The bathroom was off to the far right. Essentials, I assumed, were already provided. Well, that's one thing I won't have to worry about, I thought, feeling a bit of relief. The academy had clearly made great efforts to make us feel welcome, but that courtesy wouldn't last beyond this week. Once orientation ended, everything would change. I had no idea where I would end up. I could only brace myself for whatever came next. But for now enough thinking. Might as well enjoy this while I can. Ainslark Academy allotted 1 full week for orientation, a carefully structured transition period meant to ease new students into the academy's complex system. Once this week concluded, they would be formally inducted into the student body, and the rigorous academic schedule would begin without restraint. Of course, orientation wasn't just about introductions and briefings. The week-long window also served another, less obvious purpose. During this time, students were placed under the watchful eyes of assigned instructors. Each day brought new activities, touring the campus, learning the school rules, visiting essential facilities, and becoming familiar with the sprawling grounds of Ainslark. While the schedule appeared full, the truth was the academy could have easily compressed everything into a single day if it wanted to.
But it didn't.
Instead, the events were spaced out intentionally to give students time to observe, to bond, to clash. Time to reveal themselves. The interactions, the budding rivalries, and the first impressions made during this period could, and often would, shape the course of a student's journey at Ainslark. And since no housemaster was assigned to the dormitory during this time, the students enjoyed unchecked freedom. What they did with their spare time was entirely up to them. There were no rules.
No constraints. Just potential.
As the days passed, the orientation week drew to a close.
The scene shifted.
From the dormitory grounds, the setting now moved to the very top of the tallest tower on campus, a grand, intimidating office that belonged to none other than Damien Lawcroft, academic supervisor of the incoming batch. He sat reclined in a high-backed chair, fingers lazily flipping through papers. His gaze, however, was firmly fixed on the tall figure standing before him. "Klaus, today marks the end of orientation, doesn't it?" Damien asked, eyes narrowing with interest. The man he addressed, Klaus Tallman, gave a relaxed smile and nodded in confirmation. "You've been using your magic to monitor the students." "So," Damien leaned forward, voice sharpening. "What's your assessment? Anything noteworthy?" Though his question was phrased broadly, Klaus knew exactly whom Damien was interested in. Damien had just finished a conversation with Freya Leonhardt, the instructor overseeing the girls' dormitory. Her report had been rather bland, disappointingly so.
No conflicts.
No rivalries. Nothing juicy. The culprit behind the piece?
Maria Helmsworth.
With her sheer presence alone, she had created a pressure too great for anyone else to stir trouble. She was the embodiment of control, just as the academy had hoped and feared. Normally, when young competitors were placed together in a lawless space, conflict was inevitable. But not when a presence like Maria's loomed overhead.
She had become the deterrent.
The judge. The shadow of the staff in their absence. "Well, I suppose it's only natural," Damien muttered. "They're girls, after all. What about the boys?" He shifted his gaze toward Klaus once more. Klaus hesitated slightly before speaking. Surprisingly, things were mostly calm among the boys too. Tension was high, yes, but no one crossed the line.
No fights.
No recklessness. Damien exhaled through his nose, visibly unimpressed. So they're all cowards. He had expected more from this batch. If they were simply being disciplined, he could respect that. But if they were just timid, then what kind of mages would they become? But then Klaus continued. "Until yesterday." Damien's ears perked up, and his bored posture shifted. His eyes gleamed with sudden excitement.
"Oh?
Now that's interesting.
Go on."
"It began with a small argument," Klaus explained, clearly uncomfortable. "But it escalated quickly, into a duel.
A magic duel."
Damien's lips curled upward. This was what he had been waiting for. A little chaos to spice things up. "Let me guess," he leaned forward, voice dripping with anticipation. "Stefan Netherlore and Ivan Smith?" They were the second and third highest scorers among the boys, talented, proud, and no doubt frustrated after losing the top spot to a girl. To Damien, it made perfect sense that they'd explode first. But Klaus gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head. Only one of them was involved, Ivan Smith.
The other participant, he paused again.
Damien's brows furrowed. Was Jared Leonard, the fifth-place candidate. A heavy silence fell over the office. Damien's initial surprise shifted into a frown. His disappointment was almost tangible. Jared Leonard, he repeated slowly, the name tasting unfamiliar.
And?
He didn't want to ask, but he had to.
Who won?
Klaus looked away briefly, then answered. Jared Leonard. Silence reigned once more. But this time, it was different. Damien Lawcroft wasn't just surprised.
He was stunned.
A boy outside the top three, someone barely mentioned in early reports, had not only faced off against Ivan Smith, but defeated him in a head-to-head magical duel. A decisive victory. Interesting, Damien finally whispered, a faint smirk forming on his lips. Things had just become much more interesting.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
A day ago, the residence of the boys teemed with life as usual. The barely teenage young lads talked with one another, exchanging stories and experiences excitedly. Whether it was about the fact that their orientation would soon end, or what they had learned in the past couple of days, there was always something to serve as a subject of discourse. Of course, not everyone was engaged in conversation. Two especially were left out of the talks. One chose not to even bother interacting with the rest of the boys. Perhaps as a feeling of superiority, he intentionally isolated himself from others, preferring to read the books he had borrowed from the library. As for the other, he was simply left out of the conversations. No one bothered involving him, neither did they acknowledge his existence. This boy also passed his time by either reading the books he got from the library or the one his tutor had given him as a gift.
Yep. The boy was me.
It had been a short couple of days since we arrived, and I had not made a single friend. Everyone ignored me. I caught the gazes of some who seemed like they were interested in talking to me, but they never made any effort to try. In such a place where collectivity was the best course of action, no one wanted to defy the norm and break the unspoken rule of my ostracization. The fear that they would be abandoned by others, and also he cast out coursed through everyone, and they all pretended I didn't exist.
Well, I don't really mind, I mumbled.
Ainslark gave us a lot of free time and only took up a few hours per day for our orientation. It felt strange to me since I was certain that we didn't need a week to complete this course. There's most likely another objective to this phase, I reasoned. I doubted it was the same as the other tests we had, but at the same time, wondered what the higher-ups were up to. After exploring every nook and cranny of the apartment, apart from the rooms of everyone else, of course, I found well-hidden magic tools all around. Of course, I took great caution not to get caught snooping, even in my room. Acting natural, I diligently uncovered the positions of these objects while others were having the time of their lives.
I knew it.
They're watching us. Well, there was nothing I could do even if they were, so I decided to keep to myself and avoid trouble. Unfortunately, trouble came looking for me. And that trouble came from a particular someone. Spending my free time as usual, I read Alphonse's book and cross-referenced it with a few materials I was allowed to borrow from the library. Even though the academy provided for all our material needs and we weren't permitted to bring foreign objects, special exceptions could be requested. I was able to retain my book, ring and necklace, all mementos from those very important to me. It was an interesting study, one that never seemed to end. However, after several hours of immersing myself in knowledge, I began to feel hungry. I initially ignored it, but there's only so much one can take. Once I reached my limit, I decided to satiate my hunger and left my room. Treading the sturdy flight of stairs, I descended slowly and carefully, already feeling tired from not having too much energy left. Why did I push myself? I groaned internally with regret. Upon reaching the ground floor, which took the form of a lounge, I proceeded to my left side where my meal was supposed to have been placed. Out meals were brought at intervals, morning, afternoon, and night. They were properly packaged and special personnel brought them promptly. Since the food brought was according to our exact number, we all had our allocated portions without any need to worry about leftovers or deficits. I muttered in surprise upon getting to the large table where all the food would have been kept. Nothing was there. You're kidding, right? My mind rang. This was no laughing matter. I was hungry to the point of collapsing. I needed that meal. An expression of disbelief showed clearly on my face as I stood frozen. However, as I was still trying to figure out what had occurred, I heard tiny laughs and snickers from behind.
Kakik. Pfft. Hi hi hi.
Since my senses were always been sharpened by magic, I was able to pick up their unpleasant noises of amusement. Are they laughing at me? An unpleasant feeling enveloped me the moment I considered a very plausible answer. A small smile appeared on my face as I made a wild guess concerning what had happened to my food. Turning away from the table, I approached the group that sat in the lounge area. It was the usual squad that dominated the boys' dorm. Since Stefan wanted nothing to do with anyone and simply locked himself in his room, only coming out for compulsory activities or meals, he wasn't the ringleader of the boys. No, that title belonged to the one who scored third in our exams.
Ivan Smith.
I made sure to keep a poker face as I approached the group, who slowly stopped laughing once they noticed my advance. Good afternoon, or rather evening, gentlemen. I greeted, a basic form of courtesy. Hey Ivan, did you hear about the guardian spirit of the library? Jerry, one of Ivan's mobs, quickly brought up an irrelevant topic the moment I greeted them. This displeased me, but I kept my cool. I wasn't so childish that I would give such an obvious excuse for a snub any reaction. Do any of you dash?
Oh?
I think I heard something about that. Ivan interrupted me with an energetic response, intentionally smothering my words with his. Ah, I see, so it's them after all. My thoughts rang. I was so hungry that my belly bellowed at me. It was evening already, and I hadn't had anything but an early breakfast. Due to how tired I was, there was an option of simply giving up my lunch and waiting for dinner. This way, I could avoid any conflict. However, even in my state of weakness, there was no way I was going to let this go now. These brats. I should do something. I'm trying to dash. What do you think it looks like, the spirit? Yet another interruption came my way. At this point, I could safely assume that they were trying to thwart my efforts at communication and most likely had something to do with my missing food since they were laughing just moments ago. These young uns, I smiled, deciding to try something I hadn't done in a while.
Hummin.
A low hum suddenly filled that air as it became thick and heavy. The idiots who were trying to ignore me by engaging in idle chatter suddenly felt the change around them and instantly their expressions changed.
Cook. Irk.
Gark. Their pointless talk ceased, and no longer did any of them have amused expressions on their faces. Choked by the pure brunt of something they could lay eyes on, these boys writhed, looking in confusion. My grin widened further. How does it feel, to be under my mana pressure? Irk W. What is this? Ivan, the ringleader, muttered under strained breaths. He seemed to be the only one who could handle it to a degree, a feat that was adequate for someone who scored third. It wasn't like I was being serious either. If I was, these boys would have lost consciousness long ago, or worse. There's no need to go that far. I've achieved what I wanted. The boys all turned to me with both surprise and pain, their glares showing suspicion. No one else could be responsible for their sudden discomfort, after all. Some made attempts to open their lips, but I increased the pressure, causing the fools to shut them instantly. Now that I have your attention, I'd like to ask you a single question, I spoke, followed by a sigh. My smile vanished as I moved closer to the group of about 9 boys, Ivan's inner circle. Pointing my fingers toward where my food ought to have been, I gave my question. My food on that table, what happened to it? The pressure caused them to give their guilt away. Sweat formed on their faces and I could hear strained breaths. However, none of them confessed. The pressure must have been too much, I suddenly realized, deciding to retract it entirely. WHUUUUSSHHH. The intimidating air vanished, replaced by the usual calm of the room. However, unease was still amid the lounge. Answer me, please. I broke the silence courteously. The eyes of everyone turned to Ivan, their leader. He had the final say on their response, and no one wanted to go out of line to speak. In the case that they said what they weren't supposed to, it would spell doom for them. What are you talking about? He found himself stuttering as he spoke. The effects of my pressure hadn't fully left his body. Why are you asking us? What's out business with you? Ivan spat, trying to assert dominance. Not a bad move for a child, that is. The eyes of everyone had already given me my answer, so any excuse he thought of giving me was synonymous with a lie. I could have chosen to leave things at that and return to my room or even force him to give me the truth with mana pressure. However, I was too tired and hungry for that. There was no real need to stress myself since I was already certain the culprits were them.
I see.
It's all right then, I said, taking a few steps back as I made my way back to the stairs that led to my room. A look of relief appeared on everyone's face when I made my exit, causing me to smile within myself. As soon as I got to the foot of the stairs, I turned back to the group who kept watching me, as though impatiently hoping I vanished. I suppose I'll have to raise this matter to our supervisor, I muttered, making my voice loud enough for the boys to hear me. Their eyes bulged the moment I said this, giving surprised stares. They glanced anxiously at each other's, now turning to Ivan to deal with the matter. I didn't bother waiting. Pushing my tired body along the stairs, I began climbing.
Hey, why go that far? It's just lunch.
The superiors shouldn't be bothered about something that trivial. Ivan retorted, obviously referring to me.
You slipped up, Ivan.
My mind rang in satisfaction as I once again turned to look back at him. The same person who pretended not to care now sprang up and spoke the moment I mentioned a supervisor. That was an unwise move. I suppose the aftereffects of experiencing a mana pressure is making them anxious.
What do you mean?
Haven't you read the rules of this apartment? Didn't you pay attention during our orientation? Stealing within this academy warrants severe punishment. It didn't matter if it was a piece of paper, lunch, or a magic book. No matter the property taken, what was important was the act itself. In essence, whoever took my lunch was liable for that offense and would be punished accordingly. I don't remember giving anyone permission to take my lunch, and the academy isn't sloppy enough to give us food with one person short. That means someone took my food.
I continued.
The boys looked more uneasy while sweating profusely. It was as though they were confessing their guilt by conduct alone. It's a shame you guys didn't see the culprit. I'm certain our supervisor should be able to find the perpetrator. We wouldn't want anyone else to fall victim, now would we? I smiled weakly.
I had said enough.
There was no need to directly interfere with these guys. With the staff of the academy watching, there was no telling if an act of violence would be to my demerit. On the plus side, since the supervisors could monitor us, it meant they had also seen the incident take place. I don't need to bother lifting a finger. The authorities will deal with this. That will be their punishment. I sighed, still feeling the tight twist in my stomach. I felt so hungry, so tired. Once I got to my room, I was most likely going to lie down and wait for dinner.
Hold on.
Ivan's voice abruptly cut into my thoughts, but I ignored him. He was just going to keep rambling, after all. I said stop. He shouted, now in a tone of aggression. I still didn't have any intention to listen to him, however. Something I felt caused me to change my mind. Halting instantly, I took a look behind me and saw Ivan clad in his mana. He glared at me aggressively, having a determined glow in his eyes. I felt an unpleasant foreboding as the very thing I tried avoiding was practically begging for my response. With a deep sigh, I fully turned in Ivan and his crew's direction, asking the leader a simple question. What do you think you're doing? What do you think you're doing? My eyes narrowed, watching the fool manifest his mana. That's what I'd like to ask you. He said, now straining a smile. You'd really tattle on one of your roomies and cause them to suffer such a punishment just for lunch? His question sounded so stupid, like a sorry excuse for justification. I sighed and shook my head. I didn't have the time or energy for this. It's none of your business, is it? Since you're not the culprits. Besides, didn't you guys say you didn't care? I made to turn away, but Ivan raised his hand and pointed it at me, glaring at me in a threatening manner.
Oi.
I'm trying to be polite here. It's not nice to tattle on our fellow coursemates.
Fellow coursemates, eh?
That's quite a funny way to describe a bunch of people who totally alienated me. I would have loved to ignore Ivan and just return to my room, but the boy drew closer to me, donning a threatening look. It appeared he wasn't going to let me return in peace as long as I intended to take the issue to the authorities. You should just let this one go, don't you think so? He smiled menacingly. At this point, I had no idea if this was still the effects of my mana pressure, or if Ivan was just plain dumb. Why would he decide to choose this method? Well, if he was smart, he wouldn't have chosen to take my lunch to begin with. I rightly reasoned. When dealing with such a person, maturity had to be suspended. I had to handle him as I would a child and rightly discipline him myself. I think I remember now, that lunch, he muttered as he drew closer, displaying the mana that leaked from his body as a way to intimidate me. It was evening already and no one came to get it. Instead of it spoiling, I decided to do the owner a favor and eat it.
How shameless.
I didn't expect him to actually confess. He must have been confident in his ability to keep my mouth shut. I did the right thing, didn't I? It's not good to let food waste, don't you think? At this point, he was already at a close distance from me. Ivan placed one of his hands on my shoulder and gave a confident grin, like everything was going according to his plan since I was motionless. He paused, waiting for my answer to his question. Ivan most likely wanted to indirectly coerce me into giving up and losing my resolve. Also, as one ostracized by everyone, it would only prove worse for me to report someone like him of theft. My reputation will take another nosedive and I'll probably garner a lot of animosity. Regardless, I had nothing much to lose. It wasn't like my reputation was solid, to begin with. It appeared Ivan had overestimated my regard for such paltry things. Well, I think what you've said is nothing short of bullshit. My rude remark, coupled with the vulgar word mixed in, gave everyone quite the shock, Ivan most of all. His face morphed from an intimidating smile to a more aggressive and annoyed expression. He revealed his teeth in a growl. However, it seemed he hadn't given up on trying to convince me. Hey, little shit. Ivan drew his face closer to mine, moving to my ears as he whispered words into them. If you know what's good for you, you'd better play along now that I'm being nice. I don't want to get rough with a fellow coursemate, after all. I could feel his strained breath waft on my skin. It felt a little disgusting having someone this stupid so close to me. His arms pressed in my shoulders, trying to get a feel of my bones to make me further understand the point he was making. Apparently, threats were all he was good for. Would you remove your hands from my shoulder? I'd like to relax in my room now.
I replied.
He responded according to my wishes, thinking I had finally conceded to his deal. Grinning energetically, he gave a short chuckle. Hee hee, I knew you'd get it. Ivan must have misunderstood my words, so I had to correct him.
Get what?
I need to save up my strength for when I report to the supervisor that you took my lunch. Since it was a benevolent act, I'm sure they would understand. That seemed to have pushed Ivan to the limit of his primitive brain. He growled in annoyance, and increased the tempo of his mana in an instant. Then I guess I'll have to beat you to the point where you can't speak. Tightening his hands into fists, he took a step back to build momentum for when he would strike me. I suspected he made himself slower on purpose, since he wanted to give me room to change my mind. But that wasn't going to happen. The boys behind Ivan were smirking at me, clearly hoping to enjoy a little beatdown. Well, they were going to see what they wanted. It was a shame I wasn't going to be the one on the receiving end.
Whoosh.
Ivan's fist, enhanced by the mana coat he had on, rushed at me. Judging from its trajectory, he was aiming for my cheek. Most likely going for a quick jab that would render my face swollen and a portion of my teeth shattered to the point that I would experience pain and learn not to speak a word of the perpetrator. In this apartment, even though there are all sorts of rules, there's no single one against fights. I found that strange, but because of this fact, people like Ivan could resort to measures like this to silence others. I felt tempted to smile. After all, since all the conditions had been met, there was no need to hold myself back anymore. Whap! Whap! A loud slapping noise echoed across the ground floor, causing everyone in the lounge to drop their jaws in surprise. The sight was quite unbelievable, a total opposite of what they were expecting. Ivan, the one who received a backhand slap from me, staggered back, feeling the sharp sting on his cheek as he winced. As for his blow, I dodged it easily while responding with that slap. As a result, his assault didn't work at all. I wasn't going to resort to violence since that would be immature. Plus, we were being watched, so there was a chance that violence would attract an unknown penalty. However, I had been patient enough to ensure there were unquestionable justifications for my action.
1. Ivan stole my lunch. 2. He threatened me. 3. He struck first.
Using these three factors as a basis, there was no way I could be shackled by the fear of any punishment. In fact, I was well within my rights to attack.
And attack I would.
Brace yourself, Ivan Smith. Ivan, after recoiling from the shocking hit I gave to his now reddened cheek, glared at me with surprise and anger.
You little shit.
How dare you?
He burst out.
What was I supposed to do? Let you hit me instead. The injured pride of Ivan began manifesting as he gave heavy breaths. His eyes bulged, nearly out of their sockets, and I could tell he had most likely never gotten such treatment from anyone.
Hey brat.
Apologize to Ivan. What do you think you are?
It's just lunch.
The minions behind Ivan shouted at me, all eyeing me with animosity, totally different from the amused expressions from earlier. I'll make you regret this.
He tightened his fist.
So he's going for another hit, I should take the initiative then. WHOSHH. In a flash, I vanished from where I stood and appeared before Ivan using high-speed movements. WWA dash? Before he could react in shock after seeing about appear before him, I gave another backhand slap on his other cheek, causing his head to flail in the opposite direction. Whap! Gurg! He groaned in pain, staggering backward again. What an embarrassment! He's coating himself with mana and can't even handle a normal hit from me. My thoughts trailed. Ivan lunged at me in fury, trying to catch me off guard as I thought for a moment. The loud noise he made gave him away as I sharply looked up and dodged the powerful blow he launched. The vibrating air caused by this mana shook my hair as they missed. I returned the favor by slapping him once again on his stinging cheeks, giving him 2 hits in succession. Whap! Whap! I was too tired to actually fight this guy seriously.
Even if I did, there was no point. He was too weak.
My stomach was biting me seriously, but I endured. It would be over soon anyway.
Arg!
He coughed, taking more staggering steps backward. At this point, his back rested on the wall close to the door that led to the entrance of our apartment. I stood a few meters from him, noticing his cheeks were already swollen to a nice degree. It made him appear to be a puffed animal, accentuating his roughish face.
Ivan, come on.
Teach this little shit a lesson. He's feeling cocky already, just because you're going easy on him.
You little shit.
Ivan's gonna mess you up real good. From Ivan's conflicted expression when hearing those words, I could tell that he was already taking this fight seriously. His pride was on the line, after all. Suddenly, I began hearing hurried footsteps and whispers coming from all across the apartment. From the sound of things, many people were on their way here. A broad grin nearly formed on my face, but I restricted myself. I wasn't going to reveal anything. It didn't take long for Ivan and the rest of his crew to notice that everyone in their rooms had made their way to the stairs to see what was going on in the lounge.
What's this?
Ivan is fighting with someone?
Hold on, isn't that
Jared Leonard? Hushed sounds and muffled comments permeated the room as a cluster of crowds watched from the stairs and tried to get a view of what was going on. Since I was directly backing the stairs, none of them could really see my face, just my view from behind. As for Ivan, he had a swollen face and had already covered his body with mana. Things weren't looking good for him. Oi, is Ivan actually going so far against Jared? He's even using mana. Isn't that against the rules of this place?
What? No.
Didn't you check the regulations? There's no mention of fights. That means, we'll actually get to see something interesting. Who do you think will win?
Ivan, of course.
The guy is a beast. Didn't you see Jared's performance in the second test though?
Please.
That must have been cheating. He's only a white core. Ivan is close to the peak of yellow core. They kept talking and arguing among themselves, unconsciously increasing the tempo of their voices.
Look what you've caused, Ivan.
All I wanted was my lunch. I sighed, giving him a tired expression. He growled at me, giving a more menacing look. The boy was well aware that he was to blame for all of this, but he had come too far to turn back now. I'll teach you a lesson. You shouldn't have defied me. Raising his hand, he loosened his fist. I was surprised since I expected more pointless swings and jabs from the moron.
He chanted.
Instantly, flames began appearing in his hand. The bright amber light sparked and burst forth, birthing a dancing ball of flames on his hand, as large as a person's head. Everyone gasped in surprise. Even I had to take a step back in surprise. He's going to use magic? Really? He. His voice took a deep, darker undertone. The expression he gave showed a hint of danger, and I could tell he had reached a point where he saw me as simply an enemy that needed to be eliminated. You've brought this upon yourself, Jared. The flames flickered and seemed to grow bigger in size as he began advancing toward me.
Now burn. Burn.
Ivan Smith declared, flames in hand, clearly ready to launch it at me with full force. What the heck? I hadn't counted on things escalating to this extent. I had overestimated Ivan's intelligence since I thought he would have thought things through. Violence isn't prohibited, but the destruction of property is. Judging by the intensity of the flames, even if I evaded it, it would destroy furniture and perhaps other things. While it would be considered Ivan's attack, we would both be penalized since our fight caused it. Damn. I don't intend on being penalized this early. My stomach bit me, allowing me to remember the pain within me caused by lack of nutrition.
This caused me to wince.
Coupled with my already worried expression, I was certain I looked really pathetic. Looking scared already, eh? Well, it's too late now. Ivan grinned, bringing the flames closer. I realized that he wanted to show off his power in front of everyone at this point. If he played his card right, people would view him as one who could easily bring anyone into subjection if they defied him. This would increase his reputation and give him a better standing among students. Unfortunately, I had no intention of being his stepping stone. It feels like a waste to use this on someone like you, but... As Ivan approached with his sparking flames, the brilliant burst of fire suddenly began flickering and in a second, died out entirely.
Yeah?
Everyone's eyes widened as the flickering light went out, wondering what the heck happened. Still, none were as shocked as Ivan, who looked at his palm and found nothing but sizzling smoke. What the dash?
I heard him whisper. What's wrong?
Weren't you going to burn me up? I smiled, enduring the pangs of hunger within me. He frowned, feeling the weight of public opinion begin to shift from his side. Gritting his teeth, he attempted his spell again and a burst of fireball appeared, causing the smile had previously to return.
Oh?
Maybe he deactivated that other spell on purpose.
Yeah.
Is a middle-tier basic spell, after all. There's no way Ivan would flop it. He must be getting serious now. I smiled, hearing the fickle audience switch sides again. Ivan was pleased by the support of the crowd and took a bold step forward in response. However, just as he moved, his flames went out once again. Wa dash? His eyes widened, hearing the sizzling of dying flames in his palm. Having experienced this twice in a row, the thought had registered in everyone's mind that this was no fluke. And, just as expected, whispers began spreading. What's going on? Ivan can't chant a fireball spell?
No way.
You saw what he used in the second round. Then, do you think it's Jared that's causing his spell to fail?
No way.
Is a high-class spell. I'm so confused right now. My grin grew a bit wider as I saw Ivan getting crushed by the barely audible sounds coming from the audience. Of course, in his mana-enhanced state, Ivan could hear them too. Having no other option than to glare at me, the older boy growled in frustration. What did you do? A wry smile appeared on my face. Even if I told him, he wouldn't get it. In any case, I should end this quickly. My thought rang as I clenched my stomach. Ivan desperately activated as soon as he saw that I was already making my advance toward him. This time, however, the flames only flickered for a second, not even growing behind a mere spark before dying out. Would dash. He did it again, and this time nothing but sizzling smoke emanated from his palm. Puzzled beyond belief, his eyes went to his palm, and then to me. What are you doing? He cried, gritting his teeth. I didn't bother responding, as I was conserving energy. My steps were slow but steady. In a few seconds, I would reach Ivan. His leg began shifting back and I could feel his unease. The temptation to retreat was so evident in his eyes. However, if he did so, everyone would get a worse impression of him. Realizing this, he stood firmly in his position and pointlessly tried casting, to no effect. I'm guessing fire is his major attribute since he's in the yellow core stage already. Other spells would take a considerably longer time. That's why he's stubbornly clinging to it. Well, even if he used other spells, I had perfect counters for them. Ivan began letting out shrieks as his spell was not working at least to all eyes that could see. Not even smoke came out again. Stop wasting your mana pointlessly, it won't work, I spoke blankly, a couple of inches from the taller boy. Ivan gritted his teeth and decided to forget his spell. At our current range, he had the appropriate reach to land a solid blow on me. With this in mind, he clenched his fist and launched a powerful blow at me. My body was sluggish due to the weakness enveloping me, so I didn't want to do anything as troublesome as moving my body to dodge. Wham! Ivan's fist stopped a few inches from my face, hitting an invisible wall that was so sturdy, it generated a massive noise in response to the opponent's hit. In reflex, Ivan withdrew his hand in pain and let out a little groan. His hand was reddened, caused by the impact between him and my invisible defense. His face showed fear and confusion as I took another step closer. The boy's legs were forced to move backward, retreating as I advanced. I remained unfazed and kept moving. In response, his irrational self took over and launched volleys of mana-enhanced punches at me. My invisible barrier took the brunt of all his offenses and only Ivan suffered from all his attacks. By the time his back reached the wall and he had nowhere else to retreat to, I had already raised my hands, struggling to keep it steady due to my weakened state. An idea came to mind, so I decided to act on it. Using it should be enough, with this, it's my win. Pointing my index finger at a frightened Ivan, I moved my lips and let out little whispers. My words manifested and took the form of a spell. Invisible waves flew from my pointer and were sent to Ivan in a fraction of a moment. Gark! The target yelled out in pain, sending loud noise reverberating across the lounge, even the stairs. People felt his pain from a distance, but I couldn't care less. After a few seconds of screaming out, afflicted by something no one could see, Ivan collapsed. Thud. I made way for his body to fall to the ground, completely powerless to break the fall. Everyone could see from where they stood. Ivan had fallen unconscious. After the little mishap, I gave a sharp glare to Ivan's minions and went to my room. Those who occupied the stairs instantly parted ways and gave me more than enough room to transverse. My eyes darted to Stefan. Apparently, he had been watching my fight with Ivan. Just as before, it seemed like he wanted to say something, but was hesitant about it.
Just be quiet, Stefan.
I'm not in the mood.
My mind snapped.
Walking past him, I went to my room and shut the door tightly. The moment I felt the familiar ambience of known territory and knew no one was watching, except for those monitoring us, I fell to my bed and gave in to my weakness. Sleep couldn't come, since I was so hungry. However, I was allowed to enter a drowsy state. My thoughts trailed to the just concluded fight with Ivan, and all I had done in such an irrelevant clash. Firstly, from the moment Ivan decided to assault me, I activated sound amplification magic, making sure our commotion attracted a crowd. This was the major reason all the students came to witness our fight, even though they would have just been occupied with whatever activities they had planned for the day. Since my body was constantly strengthened thanks to my multiple cores and a well-established system within me, I could easily react to Ivan in my hungry state. I could also injure him considerably, even though I was nowhere near being serious. And then, the forceful deactivation of his spell was also caused by him. Of course, I couldn't directly stop with a spell since it was an advanced spell. But, I didn't need to go that far. Fire runs on oxygen to remain active. Even though Ivan's mana summoned flames, it ate at the oxygen around in order to maintain its stable state. Using SPLLCRAFT, I merged my mana with the surroundings and deprived his palm region of any oxygen. This caused his spell to malfunction partway through and fail. Of course, the more he tried to activate it, the less it would even work at all. That was why it reached a point where the flames didn't appear at all. He then proceeded to use melee attacks once again, forgetting I was superior in combat. However, my body wasn't in the best state, so I simply used spellcraft to harden the surface tension of the air, coagulating space particles with my mana. This caused the invisible shields to protect me. I didn't have enough focus and energy to completely shield my entire body, so I used my eyes to trail his movements, predicting where he would strike. This allowed me to create little shields only in those areas. As for the last spell I used to render him unconscious, it was also due to the aid of SPLLCRAFT. Using oscillating waves at low frequencies, I sent them in varying proportions to his ear regions. Some people weren't aware of this, but the ears are responsible for balance in any human body. Picking up sounds in form of waves makes the ear maintain a state of equilibrium. By distorting the waves and sending various types in uneven proportions, I caused a forced state of imbalance in Ivan. The forced and sudden perception of both high and low frequencies rapidly registering in his nerves caused him to experience artificial pain, sending him into a state of unconsciousness. Of course, it was all hallucinatory. His physical self remains unharmed. Well, he did fall, so that was already enough damage on his body. I sighed in silence, feeling a little frustrated. Using so much effort for such small fry was stupid of me. However, if I had just relied on brute force, I may have destroyed the property of the academy. I had no choice. Of course, that wasn't true, but I took solace in that excuse. Knock. Knock. I heard steady bangs on my door. A feeling of annoyance welled up within me. My body was in no shape to move anywhere, yet why was I being disturbed? Sighing, I sluggishly stepped out of bed and moved to answer the knock, just in case it was important. Yes, who's the dash? My tired voice stopped midway upon realizing no one was standing at the other end. I had opened the door to no one. Which bastard did this? My inner self went wild with fury. Was I already so tired that I was experiencing audible hallucinations? No, there was no way. Someone had definitely knocked. They must have scurried off the moment they did this. My mind was seething in annoyance, wondering who would have the gall to do such a thing after experiencing my match with Ivan. The burning anger within me melted the moment my eyes fell to the ground and I saw a container with a note affixed to it. My eyes bulged instantly, recognizing the box that sat on the smooth surface of the floor.
My lunch.
My voice was emotional as I nearly broke down seeing such a miraculous existence. I had never been as grateful in both my lives for seeing food. I felt an odd feeling of nirvana at that moment and slowly moved to touch the item, making sure I wasn't hallucinating.
It's real. It's real.
My eyes widened further. Picking up the box, I read the shabby note affixed to it. The handwriting was awful, as though it was written in a hurry.
This is your lunch.
We never ate it. We are sincerely sorry for taking such a precious thing. Please have mercy. We beg of you. Please don't report us to the authorities or take personal action.
We'll do anything. That's a promise. Pfft. A laugh leaked out.
My lips curled up to make a broad grin the moment I realized who my benefactors were. If only they had done this sooner, those idiots. Since my mood had significantly improved, I decided to let them off. Of course, this would only apply after they fulfilled their end of the offer rendered.
They'll do anything, Interesting.
Evening soon arrived and dinner was brought. Everyone strolled down to get their share, including Ivan and his squad. The first to reach the food site was me, causing everyone to look at each other strangely. Surprised that I, who was never an early comer, got to the food site before anyone else. I gave passive looks at the uncomfortable students as they each took their food and hurriedly left. The scene of this afternoon was still etched into their minds. When it was the turn of Ivan's squad, they appeared even more nervous, Ivan most especially. Quickly deciding to act like the rest and take their food quickly, they made for their boxes.
However,
"What do you think you're doing?" I asked with an imposing tone. At that moment, they all looked in my direction and saw me give them an evil smile. My grin stretched so far and wide that one could mistake me for a demon, but I didn't care. Moving closer to them, I gave a slight huff, causing the group to shiver. I saw your note. The moment I said this, Ivan's minions nodded respectfully and bowed their heads to offer sincerity. The ringleader looked surprised that his mobs were acting with allegiance, but before he said anything I interrupted.
What are you waiting for, Ivan? Do you want another round?
Or do you want me to report your actions to the authorities?
Choose.
It seemed that even after his beatdown, the idiot still had a great deal of pride left. Using my imposing tone, I offered his choices. If he still planned on acting stuck-up, only a cruel fate awaited him. Clenching his teeth in frustration, Ivan finally gave in. Bowing his head, just like the rest of the people around him, he offered an apology. Of course, it wasn't sincere.
Forced or not, he apologized.
I suppose this should for now. I wasn't a petty person who only wanted an apology, so it didn't matter if he offered his without meaning it. This was only a pretext for my actual desire.
Your dinner.
Hand him over. I stated blankly. Everyone's eyes bulged in shock the moment I said this. It was so forward, so crude, so imposing, but there was no way to ask for their meals, now was there? Ivan and his mobs remained silent, looking at me with surprise. They probably didn't think of me as someone who would resort to something like this.
What?
You're not going to do it? I suppose you didn't mean what you wrote in that letter. If that's the case, then I should also dash. From my tone, they knew what I was talking about. The letter told me the group was willing to do anything in exchange for mercy. If that was true, then their dinner was only a small price to pay. And no, please wait. They yelled the moment I was leaving.
It was a difficult choice to make. Food was important to everyone after all.
However, if they knew what was good for them. Just as expected, they all gave me their dinner, even Ivan, who seemed like he would rather die. In the end, none of them were keen on being punished for stealing. Unlike them, I would receive no penalty for my actions since they gave their food to me willingly.
Hugh.
I have 12 dinner packs here. I mumbled, looking at the plates before me. Of course, it would be impossible for me to finish everything in a single night. I had a large appetite, but, just like every human, I had limits. Still, this much was necessary for what I would be performing tonight. During our stay here, I haven't meditated even once. The reason was due to the fact that we were being watched. I didn't want any eyes of suspicion to fall on me. Another pivotal reason was the limited food provided for all of us. A certain quantity of meals was given, and while they contained high nutritional value, and could be said to be enough for any student our age, the food supply was limited. Circulating the flow of mana in my body, strengthening and forming my mana core. They take a huge amount of energy and stamina. Even back when I was in my house, I constantly had food being delivered to me after every session. The household was all aware of the fact that I ate huge amounts of food. It wasn't that I was a glutton, though the food brought to me was always delicious. I needed the energy to keep going in my mana circulation. If I didn't restock, I would run out of gas and pass out. It was dangerous doing something like that here since food wasn't at my beck and call. However, now that I had highly nutritious meals, I could pull it off. Let's start by strengthening my already existing mana cores. I didn't care for supervision at this point. Getting stronger was more important. Plus, they wouldn't even be able to notice what was going on within my body. If they were curious and asked, I could simply come up with an excuse and pin it on my family or something.
Hugh, let's begin.
A whisper escaped my pursed lips. It would be a long night, but if I was fortunate, I would be able to make significant progress. Even if I wasn't close to making a fourth core, increasing the potency and capacity of my other cores took priority. That's unbelievable. Damien's voice trailed the moment Klaus finished his report. To think that a brat whom he had deemed worthless due to his core would beat someone as talented as Ivan so easily. Klaus wouldn't dare lie to him about something like that, so Damien knew it had to be accurate. I refused to accept that. Damien banged his hand on his desk. The sudden sound of his clenched fist hitting the flat surface of the table startled Klaus, causing him to jump slightly. Damien's anger could be clearly seen, so the supervisor did nothing except swallow his saliva in discomfort. The reason for Damien's annoyance was something anyone who knew him was well aware of. Damien Lawcroft hated white mana core grade, no, untalented magic users. He despised them deeply. The reason for his deep-seated hatred was shrouded in mystery, though a few rumors were flying around concerning this. Sigh, let's just get this over with so I can leave already. Klaus screamed internally. I can't accept this. Maybe Ivan was having a bad day. It happens to magic users sometimes. Besides, we still don't know why his fire spell malfunctioned, Damien muttered, trying to bring up all manner of excuses. Klaus just sighed silently. His superior didn't want to accept the fact that Ivan lost due to his inferiority in ability compared to Jared. Even if he managed to dismiss the results of the duel, if it could be called that, it didn't change the fact that Jared's perfect score in the first 2 parts of his exam was beyond amazing. If not for the newly adopted third part of the exam, he would have easily scored the top spot. Still, Klaus knew better than to say this to Damien, who was seething in annoyance, too drowned in his prejudice to think rationally. Well, it doesn't matter in the end. Even if he managed to best Ivan, there's no hope for him now, after all. Klaus knew quite well what his superior meant by the words he spoke in a low undertone. The placements of everyone had already been decided, and Jared belonged to the lower class. Not only would their education be of poorer quality compared to the rest, but they would also be shown the least preference when it came to issues of pertinence in the academy. Even though the students there would be better than average by the time they graduated, they would be nothing compared to those in other classes. The prejudice against lower-placed students was also something that would terribly affect their mentality and perception in society. As a staff of the great Ainslark Academy, Klaus felt a little upset by the current system. The reason they had adopted this new method was because of the supremacist faction who valued talent and bloodline above all else. They were made up of nobles and high-ranking officials in the kingdom, and their goals were simply to shackle those who they considered unworthy to rise to a position of prominence. Of course, Damien Lawcroft was a member of this faction, and a high-ranking one at that. Exerting his influence, among others, they were finally able to make the educational reform and segregate the talented from the less adept. It wasn't like their idea didn't have any advantages attached. If there were no merits, Ainslark would never implement such a policy. However, the rationale behind such a plan was the discrimination against the less talented, that alone made the cause contaminated. Whatever. I should just mind my business. Klaus heaved another heavy sigh. He did have a fleeting thought as Damien began addressing him once more, making sure the preparations were made for the students who would be making it to the upper class. Jared Leonard seems like such a promising individual, if only things were different. As expected, we were all called out of the apartment after having breakfast. Since it was our last day in the place, everyone was already prepared for what came next. We'll be moving you to the main auditorium now. The rest of the students would have gathered there already. Klaus Tallman spoke to us. As the supervisor in charge of our male group, he had personally come to gather us for the assembly. I haven't seen him since the first day. My thoughts trailed, recollecting that several other staff took charge on their respective days. According to what Klaus was saying, the true academic session began today and we were all to gather at the central auditorium. Even though we had been given a tour of the school grounds and knew our way there, it only made sense that he would escort us personally. I suppose this will be the last time I will be receiving such treatment. The lower class awaited me, after all. Flowing Klaus like obedient labs, our group of boys trailed behind. Before long, we met up with the female students. They were, of course, being led by their female supervisor. I wasn't aware of her name, but it was only a matter of time. Though most of the girls had eyes on a few boys, like Ivan Smith or Stefan Netherlore, I felt a particular gaze on me. My eyes rolled as I could already guess who it was. I'm not going to look. No matter how hard Maria Helmsworth stared, I decided not to pay her any attention. Focusing on the path before us, my mind trailed to my session the previous night. The food I received from Ivan and his group was barely enough to sustain me throughout the night. I was so hungry once breakfast arrived that I devoured my meal on the spot. I saw the students look at me with curious glances as I ate, especially Ivan's crew, who were surprised that I could eat with such gumption after having a feast to myself the previous night. They weren't aware of the pains I went through though. And it was all worth it. Even though I was merely a white mana core grade, the amount of energy stored in my individual cores was equivalent, if not superior to any of the students around. Well, exceptions like Maria and Stefan, maybe Ivan existed. Still, to think I had 3 mana cores with equal proportion to a yellow core grade individually. I've become quite strong. Still, it wasn't enough. We were now heading into the Lion's Den, the grand assembly where all Ainslark students were gathered. I would be meeting my seniors there, plus we would all be divided into categories. While my fate was drawing the short end of the stick, I had no intention of remaining at the bottom.
Bring it on.
I'll show you what happens when you underestimate me. We all saw the grand hall from afar before venturing within. It was a tall and wide building, comparable to the Colosseum we had our tests. Though I had to admit that this was smaller. Its elegance made it superior to the one we had seen previously though. Brimming brightly in the sun stood the castle-like Ainslark Academy Grand Hall where the General Assembly would be held. Hurrying in our footsteps, we made it to the hall's entrance. It was designed as a two-door entrance, and upon arriving, Klaus and the other woman, whose name I finally found out to be Isabel, opened both sides of the door and granted us entry.
Whoa!
Escaped from the mouths of many. I maintained my poker face, but being honest, excitement welled up within me as well.
Oh, nicey.
My mind rang. The hall had a very large interior. Designed elegantly, the shiny white paint that covered the surface of everything made the large place look brighter than it actually was. Several chandeliers hung on the ceiling, and from both sides of the walls we walked past, flags of multiple colors were spread. I recognized the insignia of some of them. The royal family, Ainslark's original, the Magic Society, predecessors of Ainslark who revolutionized the world, some of which I knew personally. There were a few flags I didn't recognize, most likely due to my incomplete knowledge of the modern world of magic. My eyes finally caught something close to the end of the line of flags. It felt oddly familiar and resonated with me for a second. Finally, my eyes bulged when my recollection caught up to me.
This is.
Looking at the elegantly sewn flag that had the designs of a pair of goggles, books and a pen, I instantly knew. The logo belonged to me. Ah, I see, so those bastards really did as they said they would, I smirked smugly. Before I died, the head of Ainslark was beside me, among the king and other notable members of society. The younger man, considering my age back then, had told me that he would immortalize me by making sure my flag was among the legends in Ainslark's history. Looking at it now, this feels weird. I didn't have the time to revel in the past, though, since we were on a move. My eyes finally descended and I noticed the hall was already nearly full. 8 rows were arranged in an orderly fashion, and standing in their designated positions were the students.
Looks like we're late, I mused.
The students all had uniforms on them, though of different colors. We already learned about it in our orientation. First years wore white-colored uniforms. Blue was designated for the second years while red was given to third years. All uniforms were exquisitely sewn, having no flaws whatsoever. Since nobles and the highest members of society had children here, it was to be expected. Of course, we all had our uniforms on. It was given to us on the first day and hung in all our wardrobes. The uniform remained there just for this moment. Yes, I was donning my pure white uniform, as though expressing the core I possessed. It was pretty cool since golden threads were laced around it to form designs. I had a cool blazer on, with a waistcoat to cover the pure white shirt underneath. The golden designs on my uniform made it look beautiful, extending to many areas in lines. Even the tie worn around my collar had golden designs on it. I had a school badge on the left breast pocket of my blazer, showing the same insignia as the Ainslark logo on one of the flags. The other uniforms had golden designs on them too, similar to one another. The only change in uniforms was the color, I supposed. Now navigating our way around the hall, some of the eyes of our seniors glanced back, while others didn't seem interested. Of the 8 rows lined up in an orderly fashion, counting from the left side, 3 had red-colored uniforms. They were followed by 3 with blue-colored uniforms. Looking to the far right, I saw the last 2 straight lines. They were dressed in white, the same as ours. So that must be them, ah? My thoughts trailed and a slight smile formed on my face. We were already informed of the 3 major departments in Ainslark Academy. There were 3 courses one could offer at this institute.
Magic arts. Martial arts. Scholar innovative arts.
The other 2 departments had fewer members than us, but were still legitimately first-year students. They held different exams from us, having only a total of 30 passing from both their departments. Looks like things are pretty cutthroat no matter the department. In the first place, the bulk of examinees applying to the other 2 departments were those who had been rejected for magic. Thinking they had better try their luck in other departments, the fools who took the exams ended up being unsuitable for neither. In the end, only the few who actually had talent in either martial arts or were extremely gifted in scholarhood would be accepted. Looks like I'll be having some fun times with them as well. I grinned in slight satisfaction. Klaus and Isabel directed us to the row of white-dressed students. They were separated into male and female rows, unlike our seniors who were most likely lined up according to their class. Upper class, middle class, lower class. I knew that could be the only explanation. Oh well, let's join the line first. With the help of the supervisors already present with the 30 white-clad students and our own, we were able to orderly merge with them. Our numbers were a total of 130. We had a total of 89 boys and 41 girls, a pretty funny contrast in my opinion. Suddenly, the hall that was brimming with life and energy died down. In a flash, everyone stood motionless. Their faces were all directed to the elevated stage in front of us. Someone was entering the stage, or rather, appearing before all of us. I recognized the man well. He was. I welcome all the students gathered here. The voice that boomed out caused all the young-looking people who stood in orderly lines to straighten up their postures and don serious expressions. Now was no time for laughs or any sign of ease. The academic supervisor, and a senior lecturer himself, Damien Lawcroft, was standing right before them. On an elevated platform that looked like a wide stage, the man stood upright, having a slightly dissatisfied look on his face. Looking around the students, his eyes scanned them at what seemed like lightning-fast speed. There were a total of 8 lines, all stretching backward. The first 6 lines were in accordance with the class system. They belonged to the members of the senior stages 2 and 3. As for the new entrants, they had 2 lines, for boys and girls. Looking green and more nervous than the others, the first years gulped and shuddered in the presence of the overwhelming presence the man before them carried, with a few exceptions, of course. Damien smiled softly as he saw those who maintained their cool in the senior classes, down to the new entrants. The strong-willed ones who would be the future of the Magic Society. Those in the high class all had a confident air around them compared to others. Even among the new entrants, mixed amid those who jittered their teeth and looked around the hall to distract themselves from the unease felt down to their bones, those who weren't fazed were present. Stefan Netherlore, Maria Helmsworth, Ivan Smith, Trevor Keisel. Damien Lawcroft's thoughts trailed as he was noticing the writing buds among the students. They were exemplary, all donning an exuberance that depicted the very essence of upper-class members of Ainslark Academy. His eyes suddenly came to a halt when he saw another student who gave off the same atmosphere as the others he had seen. No, his was far more intense. It was as though he was the very essence of confidence. No sign of hesitation, and a pure brilliant smile that made the others look like pretending fools in comparison. Jared Leonard. Damien looked uncomfortable seeing me. One could guess the reason why. He must have been informed of my clash with Ivan. After all, we were being monitored. Even Klaus treated me differently while on our way to the hall, looking at me more than a dozen times. It was a good thing, though. It meant I was already gaining a reputation that would inadvertently lead to my greatness. His scowl deepened once our eyes came into contact, and I could tell he was upset at me. Of course, I knew of the whole faction governing this school. It wasn't explicit information, but by deducing the facts I had gathered so far, it made perfect sense. During the orientation, I made sure to learn as much as I could about Ainslark. It was an interesting place, but the procedures of teaching in the past compared to the present had a dissonance. Investigating further into it, I realized that there were 2 warring factions. I didn't know the details, but apparently one side was the one who brought about this new method of learning called the class system. Damien was a member of the board, as well as the new academic supervisor. Certainly, he was all for this idea. That meant he despised the fact that I was able to gain so much merit in my exams despite being a white core grade, even beating Ivan up. Still, he was an inevitable ladder I had to cross.
Don't worry, Damien.
I won't cause you any trouble if you stay out of my way. I somehow doubted that, though. As current students of Ainslark, I am certain you are all aware of the workings of this institute. Even the new entrants have already been informed of most of the details concerning your stay here. Damien Lawcroft began. I will be skimming through the most important ones. He spoke concerning the duration of our education at Ainslark Academy. 3 years was the standard amount of time spent within the institute. After that was an internship that took a year. At the age of 16, one became a legal adult and could pursue any path that opened up for them. I already had my plans, so this was not an issue. Damien further emphasized the class system, bringing out a list of names. A grin of satisfaction formed on his face as he began sorting out the good eggs from the bad. The first years were called to the stage according to our ranks and presented before everyone present. Joining the upper class, a total of 12 students. Damien began happily. I knew the numbers would be so small, but I didn't expect them to be so few.
Maria Helmsworth, Stefan Netherlore, Ivan Smith, Trevor Keisel, Lily Peenhart.
The students trailed to the elevated platform by climbing the very short flight of stairs by the side. They all presented themselves before the seniors and juniors alike, just like honor students. I felt a little sting of envy since I had every right to be among them, but suppressed my annoyance. The start hardly mattered in a race. I simply had to save my strength and channel it towards something more productive. Damien's eyes went to me and he gave a disgustingly condescending glare, as though telling me not to even dream of achieving any great heights. I wonder how he'll feel if he realizes he's dissing one of the immortalized figures in this academy, I mused. After he called upon them, Damien ordered the 12 to return, forming a separate line for them. Next, he called the middle-class students. By the time he was done with the names, I calculated a total of 80 of them. That was a huge spike from the first call. So, the lower class students are a mere 38, Well, all things considered, it was plausible. Most students would fall in the middle class, while the ones considered dregs, who barely got into Ainslark, had to be fewer. I was a little happy though. Most of those in the lower class who hadn't been called to the stage yet were from the martial arts and scholar divisions. I didn't have to deal with the snubs of the magic arts department. It was like a brand new chance to make comrades. Tightly gripping my fist in resolution, I made up my mind to make a better impression on those who would be my future friends. We're all in this together, guys. The middle-class students were sent down the stage and also formed their line. The boys and girls from the remnant lines were told to merge, forming the lower class line, same as our seniors. I waited for our turn to rise to the stage. It would be a funny experience staring down on so many young ones as a new entrant, but I was prepared for it.
All right.
On to the next matter at hand, your lecturers. My eyes twitched a little. Damien didn't call us to the stage. Instead, he decided to skip regular procedures and dive straight into the next item on the list.
Oh, you're kidding me, right?
A large portion of my rationality told me to let it go, that it was no big deal. However, I couldn't overlook his intentional error. Perhaps it was due to the childish emotions within my smaller body, or a degree of pent-up anger. I couldn't bottle in my increasing dissatisfaction with someone who claimed to be a lecturer in this great academy. Using sound amplification magic, I cleared my throat and spoke out with absolute confidence. Excuse me, Sir Damien Lawcroft, great academic supervisor and senior lecturer of Ainslark Academy. I believe you've missed a line. My voice echoed throughout the large hall. Instantly, everyone's eyes darted to me. Surprise, fear, disbelief, many emotions were mixed in their facial expressions. I chose to ignore all the eyes on me, even the ones from the new entrants such as myself. There was only one person I concentrated on.
Oh? What is this?
Damien Lawcroft turned in my direction and walked on the elevated platform, nearing where my line was. A condescending smile was on his face, a contrast to the frown that existed on mine. I glared at him, enough to tell him my stance on his impudence. The regulations state that you introduce all new entrants to the other students in the assembly. Whether or not we're lower class shouldn't matter. This is the most basic of basics, Sir Damien Lawcroft. We were taught all of this thanks to the excellent orientation you prepared for us. A mix of disrespect coupled with reverence could be heard in my tone. While I took a courteous stance, it was clear that my true intentions were anything but, at least to Damien, whose smile began to vanish the more I spoke. I see, his lips pursed, showing a grim, forbidden look. I had crossed a line. However, with students numbering nearly 500 all present in the hall, teachers as well, Damien Lawcroft couldn't act rashly. This made my lips break from the scowl I had and turn into a soft smile. Seeing this infuriated Damien even more, but he was restricted in his actions. You're only our supervisor. There's really nothing more you can do now that I've been accepted as a student. Plus, you're the one in violation of the protocols. With this line of thought, I awaited the man's next move. If he was only a bumbling idiot, then he would only achieve disgrace in front of everyone. However, if he had an ounce of sense, then... I see, it must have skipped my mind. Damien Lawcroft responded, just as I expected.
My grin became broader. Oh, that's fine, sir.
We all make mistakes. A big O and A permeated the hall as everyone was surprised by my gall. The teachers, especially Klaus, whom I spotted from the corner of my eyes, all looked shocked.
Still, Damien kept his cool.
Leaving where he stood, he returned to the center of the elevated stage and returned his gaze to the long parchment in his grasp. I shall now mention the name of the lower class students. I nodded in satisfaction. The names of my new classmates poured out. As the students heard their names, they climbed the stage. Whether or not they belonged to a low class, they were still Ainslark students deserving of respect. Every single one of them topped the thousands who failed. The least amount of reverence should be given to them. That was the reason I refused to have the names of students in the lower class names skipped. Jared Leonard. Hearing my name, I jumped a little in surprise. It still felt strange, but what of it? I climbed the stage in what I could only call a graceful manner. The piercing gazes of everyone around me would cause anyone to faint. No one wasn't paying any attention to me now. Though this was an entirely different way to go about it, I had gained everyone's recognition. It was only a matter of time before I earned their respect. Damien called more names, and after he was done, he introduced us lower class students, sending us back after he was done. As I went back to my line, I heard a buzzing sound in my head. It was familiar, but the signature of this felt oddly different from the other one I experienced. "Don't think you've had your way, brat. You're all still trash," the gruff voice echoed in my head. Of course, it was from Damien Lawcroft. He told me what he didn't have the gall to say in front of all the students and staff gathered. It didn't faze me at all since I knew his words didn't ring true. Still, Damien had clearly proven he would be a stumbling block in my path. As such, he had to be eliminated. It's just as I said in the beginning. I won't cause trouble for you if you stay out of my way. It was a pity he has to do the opposite. After we returned to our lines, Damien called out the teachers who would be taking our classes. Like a poof in the air, a couple of people appeared through teleportation behind Damien. It happened so fast that everyone was stunned, even the seniors. These would be our lecturers. I saw 9 smartly dressed individuals. They looked formal and exquisite in their unique attires. Among them was Legris Damien. His eyes darted to me for a second and winked. I laughed a little at his gesture. The man hadn't changed a bit. As you all know, each class is assigned a lecturer to teach them. Some additional teachers will be specialized in particular courses and electives, but the general courses will be taught by your assigned lecturers. We all paid rapt attention as Damien addressed us. I was especially concerned with the 9 lecturers who weren't exactly lined up in perfect order. For example, Legris was stationed close to our lower class on the elevated platform, but that didn't mean he would be teaching us. He's a senior lecturer, after all. I will now introduce your lecturers to you. Mentioning their names starting from all the upper classes, Damien began allocating the lecturers. As expected, Legris was assigned to the upper class of the second years. All lecturers assigned to high-end classes had to be very high in rank. After he was done with the most important students, the middle-class lectures were allocated.
I waited in patience.
After he was done, only 3 lecturers were left. One of the 3 would be our teachers. None of them looked especially impressive. As one would expect from the least qualified lecturers, they were nothing compared to the others, dress-wise and the aura they emitted.
However,
my eyes darted to one of the 3 who appeared to be the least conspicuous. He had an air of nonchalance about him, and out of everyone else, he dressed the simplest. Having a plain shirt that wasn't tucked in at all, along with black pants with golden threads forming a straight horizontal line, his shoes were average. His tie looks nice though, I thought to myself, admiring the nice logo it had at the center. Unfortunately, his tie was loosened around his collar, making him look rougher than normal. His buttons didn't even reach the top, stopping 2 steps short. His sleeves were even folded up, displaying a good portion of his arms. They were firm and evenly toned. If anyone saw him, they would instantly wish he wouldn't be chosen as their lecturer. No, they would even wonder why he would be considered a lecturer in the first place. Even students were dressed better than he was.
however,
I wasn't like the others. There was no way I could make a pedestrian judgment based only on appearance. He stood out too much, which made my curiosity piqued. Furrowing my eyes a little, I ignored the others and focused on this man alone. I saw his bored eyes slowly turn in my direction the moment I tried prying into him. This shocked me for a moment, but I refused to lose composure. A smile formed on the man's face as he took his eyes off me, practically forgetting what I was about to do.
Hugh, I knew it.
He's not normal. Damien called out the names of the lecturers allocated to the lower classes, and to my classmates' dismay, the very ruffian who was nothing like a lecturer was chosen to teach us. I heard grumbles and dissatisfied sounds coming from everyone, but amid everyone's annoyance by the choice, I felt strangely satisfied. Something about the man called Naren Khalid made me grin in excitement. There's no way I want an average teacher. This unique guy, he's perfect for our class. I saw Damien frown from the corner of my eye. He had donned a satisfied grin moments ago, but after seeing that I was happy with his choice for my class, that fulfillment in his face turned sour. Professor Naren Khalid moved closer to our class line, as the other lecturers had done for their various classes, bringing the both of us closer in distance. As though by coincidence, our eyes met and I was met with yet another amused smile from the man. With a smile on my face as well, I didn't look away. Let's get along well, teach. We were dismissed after the assembly was over. Classes started that very day, so we had to leave for our various lecture halls. According to the Academy's class system, the upper class made up of all years had their territory. The same applied to middle and lower classes. The dorms were also separated that way. That means I'll be living among lower class seniors. Interesting. We already knew our dorms, and our dorm numbers had been given to us. Just as in the previous apartment, we didn't need keys to open them, a magic signature would have to do. However, going to our various dorms would have to wait. At the moment, We needed to attend our first lecture. There were multiple exits in the hall, so each class took one of each and exited the wide building, making way to their classrooms.
This should be fun, I whispered.
30 minutes later. Well, remember how I had said our first lecture would be fun? Well, at the moment I wasn't so sure anymore.
Why?
It was because we hadn't even started yet. Everyone was given 5 minutes to reach their respective classes and another 5 to settle down. Afterward, lectures would begin in earnest. As a result, those of the first-year lower class made it to our hall just in time. The first thing I thought of when entering the facility was that it was unimpressive. Of course, since it was still a hall within Ainslark, it wasn't run down or anything. It had the appropriate standard befitting the institute. However, that was all there was to it. Compared to the other buildings we had seen, this particular lecture hall could be considered trash. It only had one entrance which also served as the exit. The interior was not decorated, having a plain brown color of wood that was used to furnish the place. The wood was in good condition, but still. It was a spacious hall though. There were more than enough seats for all the students gathered, a total of 50 seats. Since our numbers were only 38, there was no problem. Still, I couldn't help but compare this hall to my mental imagery of the other halls the higher placed students would be using. I grudgingly accepted my current predicament and settled at the very front of the class. I'm no slacker. However, even after our lecture was supposed to have started, no lecturer showed up. It had been 20 minutes since we were supposed to begin class. Nothing came forth. Is this really how I'll begin my first day in school?
Bam!
The only door leading to and out of the classroom was flung open as someone ventured in. The sudden sound startled everyone, who had already given up on anyone showing up and were already engaged in conversation. From the corner of their surprised eyes, they saw the one who entered the classroom. He had the usual causal air around him and his outfit was as radical as always. Walking in with a nonchalant stride, he walked to the center of the classroom stage where a lectern was erected. A smile formed on my face as I followed the man's movements, as though my eagerness had been quelled.
Where have you been?
I've been waiting forever, Naren Khalid. While others were engaged in conversation, except for a few, I was bored out of my mind. It wasn't my policy to sit around doing nothing, but that was all I did for over 20 minutes. Next time, I'll just bring a book along with me to class. The students slowly ceased their talks and those who were standing subtly returned to their seats. Despite the man's appearance and tardiness, he was still a lecturer. No student dared to show defiance before him. I apologize for being late.
Naren began.
This came as a surprise to many since lecturers weren't known for their polite nature, especially one that looked rough like him. I was called by the academic supervisor as well as a few others concerning my outfit today. His voice trailed. This nearly drove a laugh out of me. All things considered, he was dressed inappropriately for a lecturer. He must have received some chewing out by his superiors. Now then, let's begin. His voice sparked and the air of unease seemed to drift away the moment a wide grin appeared on the man's face. To everyone's surprise, as I noticed by looking around, the lecturer we had wasn't all bad. Not only had he apologized to us, but he also donned a bright and friendly smile to begin our time together. All right, let's get the troublesome stuff out of the way first. You should all introduce yourselves. He pointed to the back of the class, establishing the order for speaking. From the far right at the rear to the left at the forefront. Naren also mentioned what he expected us to say.
Name. Age. Department.
Reason for studying at Ainslark. There were no objections, so all 38 of us decided to speak. One after the other, I heard the students introduce themselves. None of them were of any particular interest to me. After all, the ones who sat at the back were mostly the ones I knew from the magic entrance. They weren't really impressive, plus their personalities were trash. As the introductions went on, I saw someone I became interested in. My name is Annabelle Frederick.
I'm 12 and
I'm in the Scholar department. My reason for coming to this academy is well. The few scholars who had already introduced themselves all said the same things. The Grand Scholar, Lewis Griffith, is an inspiration. I would like to walk down the path of a scholar because of how awesome it is. Knowledge is amazing. It's only natural I want to further my knowledge. A scholar understands the fundamentals and theories behind anything. Knowledge is power, and so I believe being a scholar is the best option for me. All of them were bullshit.
How stupid.
My mind rang the moment I heard their paltry excuse for a reason. In the first place, most of these hypocrites would have become magic users if they could. It was due to their lack of aptitude that they resorted to the next best option. Also, The common assumption of knowledge is power was all rubbish. Rather than having knowledge, the raw ability to pummel any opponent was what would truly be regarded as power. Besides, only fools were of the opinion that top magic users didn't have knowledge. To operate magic properly, knowledge was required. In essence, magic users had both knowledge and power. Scholars were nowhere near being the best in terms of departments. The last one who said that being a scholar was the best option for him nearly cracked him up. He didn't really have an option, to begin with. They were all weak, both in mind and power. I wasn't condescending at all, they already disqualified themselves, that was all. As a true scholar who reached the pinnacle and became a legend, I could say it with all honesty. If I had become a magic user in my past life, I would have been able to achieve way more. The path of a scholar is merely a glorified loser's road. No matter how grand their dreams were, as long as they existed in my shadow or used me as a standard, they were never really going to be fulfilled. I want to surpass the greatest scholar known in the Eastern Kingdom and become the best grand scholar to ever exist. I nearly coughed once she said that. Is this girl an idiot? Was the first thing that rang in my mind. The look on her face showed how shy the little girl was. Her cheeks were flushed as she spoke and her short frame made her look fragile. I was certain I could break her easily without resorting to magic enhancement. What first drew my attention to her was the fact that her name was the same as my mother's. Why did this girl, Annabel Frederick, have to spew such fantasies? I continued to listen to her. People often believe Lewis Griffith is the best scholar to have existed. However, though he propounded many amazing and groundbreaking theories, I have found several holes and inconsistencies in his thesis and books. It was almost as if they were incomplete. Another cough nearly escaped from my lips. No, this time it did. My loud cough interrupted what Annabel was saying, causing everyone to stare at me since I was seated at the forefront. Welp, this is awkward. Annabel Frederick made a statement that caused me to lose composure and cough loudly, nearly choking on my saliva. It was as if his treatises were incomplete. How did she know? Despite my huge achievements in the realm of magic theories and evolution, I never revealed all I had learned to the people of the time. Hiding some of my most valued documents, I had hoped someone would find them eventually. Also, if they didn't, I thought those who learned from me would build upon what I had already established and arrived at the truth sooner or later. That way, I wouldn't be giving them all the answers on a platter. However, to my dismay, no one had done much to further what I already established. Most thought it was already perfect, or too complex to be improved. As a result, in-depth magic theories and complexities remained at a standstill till this age despite new spells and branches of magic being developed. I was disappointed to learn of this the moment I could access better books in my household library. Still, to think, a girl her age had figured it out. It was too shocking that I had to let out a cough. Welp, this is awkward, my thoughts trailed. The girl's eyes darted toward me. It was crystal blue, a sharp contrast to the yellow hair she had. She furrowed her brow and made a slight frown. She must think I was making fun of her, or something. Her frown didn't fade as she turned away, returning her gaze to our lecturer. That is all I have to say. Sitting down in a hurry, she remained in a terrible mood, one I had to guess was my fault.
Oof, what have I done?
Of course, I noticed it wasn't just me that reacted to her words. Most people around gave amused looks and even stifled their chuckles and sneers at her. In a way, all she had said brought only ridicule to her person. Her image was already ruined on the first day. It felt wrong to me, especially considering how the girl looked like a child due to her small stature. We were all budding teenagers, but she still had the features of a 10-year-old. Well, what did you expect when you just went and spewed such a grand dream in front of everyone? I softly smiled, looking at her lonely gait. Still, my impression of her had changed. The fact that she mentioned the incompleteness of my legacy made her worthy to be called a scholar indeed.
How interesting.
It appears I've found a good one already. The introductions went on without any incident. As Naren had stated earlier, we had no right to criticize anyone's introductions by verbally or physically assaulting them. However, mere chuckles and snickers didn't count, so many made fun of others using suppressed laughter and condescending facial reactions. My name is Edward Carl Leon. I'm 13 years old, Department of Martial Arts. I only have one goal, and that is to further the mastery of my blade. I will sharpen my sword and perfect my skills until sword arts are recognized throughout the Empire. No, all around the world once again. This introduction also struck a chord within me. I looked at the one who made such a grand statement. It was a boy having brown hair with equally brown eyes. His appearance looked mature for his age, and even with his uniform covering his body, I could tell that he had a finely toned figure. He had a slight scar on his left cheek that resembled a sword slash, and the way his eyebrows slanted, his eyes showing a deep resolve that was as firm as his posture, the boy was dead serious. I sighed a little. His dream was certainly not impossible, but a single person like him could never achieve it. One of the new changes that had occurred after my death was the decline of martial arts and the rise of scholarhood. Due to my influence, scholars became highly revered. In essence, they rode my coattails and became quite respectable. In contrast to this, martial arts like sword arts, spear arts, etc.,
entered a state of decline.
This was because magic had evolved to a high level that no one was really interested in dedicating years and efforts to strengthening the body, sharpening the senses, and relying on one's strength to grow powerful. Just as I had thought when I was younger, magic could cause miracles to occur with a single spell. However, martial arts were something that required hard work and dedication to produce results. Compared to magic, it was much more difficult. With my theories simplifying magic and bringing forth new possibilities, no one could boast of the same in martial arts. As a result, the people became lazy. Magic was revered. Scholarhood became respected. Martial arts were neglected. Martial arts may be more difficult in terms of training and practice. However, when it comes to results, it will never betray you. Many inconsistencies may occur in magic. In the end, you can only rely on your body. I want the whole world to once again see the value, no, the superiority of martial arts, especially sword arts. As the boy bathed in his grandeur and showed his unwavering spirit, I rolled my eyes. While I respected his goals, they were too childish. Words like those only deserved to be spoken by the strong. How conceited. I had several friends who were martial artists, the best in their fields. I was especially close with the Sword Emperor, famed to be the strongest with a sword throughout the land. However, even he admitted that humans had a limit and that he had reached his. If only I had more skill in magic, I could achieve transcendence, was something he often told me.
He was right.
While martial arts was an essential aspect of power, it couldn't best magic in terms of efficiency. This didn't mean magic was easier. Some magic spells and discoveries took years to study and perfect. Original magic took one's entire lifetime to complete. However, magic was all about bending the laws of the world as a whole. Martial arts could never hope to achieve that. That was a reason why people just preferred dedication themselves to magic. Still, I didn't disagree that martial arts needed a revival. It was extremely useful, and even I wished to be very skilled at it since it covered some weaknesses of magic.
Well, let's see how it goes.
I could educate this boy and mold him to be capable of achieving his dreams. A smirk appeared on my face. Once again, I felt many eyes on me. The boy named Edward Carl Leon also stared at me and frowned deeply the moment my smile registered in his eyes. Once again, I had to assume that my expression was a sign of disrespect to his ideal. The introductions continued and no one else caught my interest. The only two I actually liked were most likely seeing me in the opposite light. One way or the other, I would need to win them over. They need me more than I need them anyway. Not long after, it was my turn to speak. The entire first row was empty on both left and right sides. There was a pathway used to walk at the center, and the classroom was designed to have elevated seats on step-like platforms. Since there were 5 seats in each section, right and left per row, that made a total of 10. The rows numbered 5, giving 50 seats in total. Of the 10 combined seats at the forefront, I was the only one who occupied any. My seat was to the right. The other students sat behind me. I wasn't sure if it was due to the phobia of occupying front seats, or their reverence of me. Still, it was disappointing. As I arose, everyone's eyes were locked on me. The unflinching gazes of the few dozen that wanted to hear what I would spout. The pressure was enough to unnerve anyone, but this much was nothing. My name is Jared Leonard Alphonse Sereth. I saw many people recoil from my words. Apparently, they all wondered why someone from such an inept noble household would be studying magic. Since most of the people in the hall were either scholars or martial artists, they weren't aware of my power yet. Some had a gnawing suspicion and a few whispers concerning me were passed around, but it still came as a surprise that my family was one that hadn't birthed a magic user in over 2 centuries. I'm 12 years old. With a confident grin, I spoke about the reason for enrolling in the academy. Ainslark was home to a lot of my experiences in the past. I had achieved so many victories and losses, but one thing was certain. This was the first place where I was acknowledged for the brilliant mind I possessed. My goals are simple. It's simply to learn more about magic and grow as a magic user. Everyone looked surprised, no, underwhelmed by my response. As someone who had spoken out during the assembly and made such a commotion, one would expect that I had a more grandiose ambition. However, only fools would take what I said lightly.
Learning more about magic?
Grow as a magic user? Wasn't that what everyone came to the academy to do? However, the extent of said learning and growth was dependent on the person. My true intention was to stock up as much as I could during my short stay here and access all the information available. That would prove to be my stepping stone to the ultimate goal of becoming unparalleled. I will rise above a grand mage and become the most powerful magic user to ever exist. Saying such a thing would be too conceited of me at this level. A smile formed on my face as I sat. While I did not have the confidence to say anything of the sort at the moment, a time would come when my actions would speak louder than any word that could be uttered. I'll let them see it with their own two eyes. Telling them now would be spoiling. Plus, blurting those kinds of words out would be cringe. Alright, that's all, I think, Naren said after a few seconds of silence. I was the last to speak, so it was time to move on to the next topic on the agenda. My name is Naren Khalid, your lecturer for this year. You may be wondering a lot of things, but be at ease. I didn't ask for you to mention your household or mana core grade since none of it matters here. You're all known to be trash, and I know this might cause a great deal of temptation to arise amongst you. Thoughts of superiority may begin to arise, that even among trash you're better. However, I will not tolerate anything of the sort. His long speech resonated well with me. He certainly expressed the spirit of Ainslark Academy that I remembered. You're all new buds that need to be taken care of. I will not promise anything concerning achieving the reasons you have for enrolling here. Your growth shall be determined by your determination and efforts. However, I will say this. He let out a broad grin and stretched his hands as though expecting an embrace. No, it was of admonishment. You have all made it to this academy through pure merit. That much is true, and for that, I can only render one word to you. Congratulations. My eyes caught many people tearing up as a result of his words. They were certainly moved, I was too. Naren was able to say the one word most had not had the privilege of hearing, and he meant it wholeheartedly. The fact that everyone here scored enough to enter the greatest academy in the Eastern Empire meant we were not trash. Now then, you should all buckle down like champs. The lecture begins. It was simply amazing, Naren's lecture. I had expected him to be an average tutor and more of a powerhouse, but was excellent at the former as well. After commending us, Naren addressed the most pertinent matters first. He projected our schedule on the wall behind him, making sure it was well above his head so he wasn't obstructing his view. Light manipulation magic, eh? Nice mana control, I mused, remembering how the entrance results were announced in the same way. Apparently, we had 3 magic lessons per day. Since this was an academy that encapsulated a whole lot, there were other courses that involved areas outside magic. Courses like etiquettes, history, politics, etc. were taught as electives. Main courses were divided into 2 parts, general and specialized. Since we were a class comprised of 3 departments, a system like this had to be implemented. General courses were to be taken by all departments in our class while specialized courses depended on our departments. Depending on the department we were in, our specialized courses differed. Magic users had courses like basic mana control and basic spell creation, while scholars had more courses that dealt with theories. For martial artists, skill development and fitness courses were added. It was a complex, yet, well-distributed curriculum. Well, almost anyway. You can choose as many as 5 electives. I wouldn't overwork myself if I were you though. Naren added when handing out the forms to us. He used a wind spell to control the flyers, allowing them to each land on our tables for us to fill. Looking through the electives, I saw nothing especially useful among them. Electives weren't compulsory, but it was a general opinion that it was better to study them. While the merits were there, such as extra credits and an easier grading system that gave easily earned points to add to the combined score, the disadvantages for me outweighed those paltry reasons. It's a waste of time. A whisper accidentally leaked out of my mouth. I already had a lifetime's worth of knowledge concerning these electives, and even as an affiliate lecturer here, I knew more than I could ever learn as a student. There was no need to bother myself about it. Besides, courses like politics, history, etiquettes, even sewing, that's right, it was a course, were things I could pick up in my pastime and learn by myself. There was no way I would spend a great deal of my time learning such things now. Yup. No electives for me. That meant no free points or extra credit, but I didn't mind. If I did perfectly well in all my main courses, it wouldn't matter in the end. From the corner of my eye, I saw people biting their pens to figure out what courses to pick, but I beckoned to Naren that I was done with my choice. Ah, I see, interesting. He smiled a little after picking my form and reading its content. I guessed he must have thought of me as one of two things, a genius or an idiot. As others were still deciding, Naren moved on to other areas of importance. Sharing another set of flyers to each table, a piece landed on mine. The total list of courses you will be offering, both general and specialized, as well as their time. Electives are included in the back, so if you want to choose any or have chosen already, check the time you'll be having them. From my list, I could see that I would be having lots of free time on my hands. List of courses and time. General courses.
Homeroom, 9 a.m.
Course 1 to 10 a.m., Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Course 2 to 12 p.m., Monday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Course 3, 2 p.m., daily. ...
The list went down even to my specialized courses. Naren had already recognized us based on departments and had given us the sheet according to which categories we fell under. By the time I finished reading, I was grinning at the list of courses I had to offer. They were 9 in total, 5 general courses and 4 specialized ones. General courses.
1. Basic magic knowledge.
The fundamentals of magic. No matter the department, this course is important for everyone since magic is an essential part of the world. 2. Concepts of significance. There are wonderful theories and concepts that shape the modern view on several things. Magic, martial arts, etc. all stem from concepts. 3. Physical exercise. Everyone must maintain an adequate level of fitness. Light exercises and aerobics will be performed daily. 4. Advanced general studies. The fundamentals have been taught at home through the aid of tutors, so advanced general knowledge of language, music, calculations, and other essential subjects will be learned. 5. Recreational activities, field study, botany, zoology, and various other environmental knowledge will be learned. Specialized courses. 1. Basic mana control. Mana is the very lifeblood of magic that exists both in the surrounding and within every magic user. The fundamentals of controlling the magic within one's magic core will be taught. 2. Basic spell creation. Spells are the mechanics of magic. They are complex methods used for activation and transformation of mana into the desired forms of magic. The very foundations for spells will be learned. 3. Contemporary magic arts. Magic has advanced far beyond what it used to be. With modern magic coming into the light, spanning from those used for everyday activities to the more complex and powerful ones, students will learn of these new wonders of magic. 4. Magic theories. Magic is derived from concepts and theories. Learning these theories will broaden your scope of magic even further. Of these courses, I was most excited about the contemporary magic arts since it represented the very essence of modernity, but that didn't mean the others weren't important as well. I heard that more difficult variations of the courses we were offering now would surface as we advanced to a higher level, and new courses such as magic research and magic philosophy would be dealt with. I'm quite excited about the future. And there's one final thing you should all know. Naren's eyes were a little narrowed now, and his expression didn't show any signs of pleasantry. Holding on to the lectern tightly, he pushed his body forward and addressed our class with earnestness. Your familiar selection ceremony is in a month, and the interclass exchange is in 3 months. In that short span of time, you've all been properly oriented and you must have also read the brochure, so you realize what that means, don't you? An air of unease wafted across the classroom. It's sooner than I expected. My mind rang. We were told a lot of things during orientation, but those were only general knowledge. Our curriculum and schedule waited until we got to the actual class. From what our lecturer was saying, we didn't have much time until the 2 most important events for new entrants would arrive: familiar selection ceremony and interclass exchange. Still, I wasn't too bothered. It didn't change what I had to do on my end, and no merit would come from letting the short time get into my head. I just had to work according to my own pace. With that in mind, I declare homeroom over. Get yourselves ready for the next lecture. Naren muttered and left the class. He took with him the forms of everyone who had registered for their electives and left us to ourselves. My eyes gazed at the clock on the side of the wall and noticed that it was about 10 minutes before our first course would begin. Homeroom lasts for an hour, but it's usually not more than 30 minutes. The rest of the time is spent in preparation for the actual courses. Because Naren came late, he ate through more time than usual, giving us a less than desirable amount of time for ourselves. However, since he was the lecturer who would be taking our main courses, the burden still fell on him. After all, he would be the one going through the stress of speaking. As I considered how to spend the little time I had left, a shadow descended upon me. I had already noticed that several eyes were on me, and they were mostly hostile. However, it was outside my expectations that someone would challenge me this soon. My eyes darted in the stranger's direction and I caught his appearance. That slightly bulging muscular body underneath the uniform, it was so obvious who it was.
Edward Carl Leon. Yes?
Can I help you? I took a calm, polite tone as he stopped a few meters short of my chair. His eyes were burning with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. It was most probably anger, though I could swear I did nothing to incur such a state. Jared Leonard Alphonse Sereth, you should apologize. His tone sounded serious and full of zeal, but the statement itself was too flat. Confused by what I had just heard, I cocked my head to the side and stared at him curiously.
What?
I didn't mean to say that, but it leaked out. I had been nothing short of polite since our brief meeting. In fact, he was the one being rude, so this brat was meant to be the one offering an apology. However, as a mature individual, I allowed him to speak. I was watching you from my seat, noticing the way you looked down on everyone's hopes and dreams in this academy. You even laughed at Annabelle's goals and sneered at mine. That's a rotten attitude. I sighed the moment he said this. So this guy was still hung up on that?
How bland.
I had taken him for a more intelligent individual, but it appeared he was only just a meathead. Why, you don't have to, Ed, I'm fine. A voice suddenly spoke out. It was soft and shrill, an epitome of childhood and a feminine disposition. Yep, the one who protested was Annabelle. Edward sharply turned in her direction, so mechanical that I could mistake him for an automaton. But Anna, he mocked, your goals? No, our goals. Remember what the lecturer said? No one should give in to the temptation of superiority, yet this guy has already started it.
Edward's teeth were clenched.
I could sense a deeply rooted frustration in him. This guy was not just pissed at me, but several others.
Perhaps he was venting? No. Ah, I see now.
A broad grin formed on my face as I figured out the cause for his explosive attitude. Everyone in the class, who had just been watching the incident, suddenly gasped, most likely surprised by my brazen attitude even when confronted by someone on that very matter. Edward turned in my direction and saw my smile, once again mistaking it for an act of arrogance.
You? Who do you think you are?
You're the same as all of us, aren't you? Even if you have no grand hopes or ideals, you shouldn't look down on the rest of us. I said nothing. I honestly thought you were a decent person when you stood up for all lower class students and made that man call us to the stage, but to think you were just an arrogant and rude guy instead. There were many things I could say or do to this person, but I doubted if any of them could completely change how he felt about me. What was currently affecting this boy's psyche was a syndrome known as self-righteousness. In essence, Edward thought he was in the right and I was in the wrong. His ideals and perception of those two concepts automatically ensured he had every justification to get mad at me. Plus, the way both he and that Annabelle girl conversed, they must know each other from somewhere.
Are they friends, Aurea?
My grin grew broader and I still said nothing. That must have been enough to push Edward to the breaking point. He raised his hand high above his head as though trying to resort to violence. That's a bad move, kid, you'll be penalized.
Ed, no. Annabelle, his friend, quickly shouted. It was too late.
The boy's hand descended rapidly. In a few seconds, a loud thud would be heard.
Whoosh.
Edward's hand descended in a rush. No one tried to stop him. No, someone did. However, Annabelle was too slow and too far away to stop the motion of his quick and powerful arm. I didn't move from where I sat and observed the trajectory of his arm. My lips curled up in a smile when I realized his hand was never targeted at my face, or any part of my body for that matter.
Wham!
His hand slapped the desk in front of me, creating a loud sound that reverberated across the classroom. Everyone displayed shock at the intentional miss of Edward since they were already convinced that he would assault me.
Smart move.
I thought you would actually hit me. I whispered with a smile, enough for him to make out my words.
I'm not stupid.
I know the repercussions of that. I have no intention of facing a penalty this soon. He replied calmly, though I could tell that the boy was a little unhinged by my calm reaction to his table slam. I didn't try avoiding his hit or blocking. My body didn't even show any sign of reflex, and that was because I knew he wasn't going to hit me from the start.
So? Are you done? Apologize.
Edward's teeth clenched together in annoyance.
No. Apologize.
He demanded more violently, smacking his second hand on the desk. Which didn't faze me as well. I was certain that he felt like the good guy with all that he was doing. Fighting for the feelings of everyone, especially the girl behind him. However, all of that was a mirage within his mind. In actuality, his actions so far were akin to bullying. If one was to neglect the smile I had on my face and my calm disposition, it would appear as though Edward was a bully who was forcefully infringing on my territory. I had technically done nothing wrong. Even the teacher didn't complain, but his crusader personality made him feel responsible for my supposed mockery, and he was attempting to correct that. My interest in the boy was already waning. If you don't apologize, then. Placing his hand on his chest and touching the school's crest with his index finger, Edward resorted to something no one had expected him to. Jared Leonard Alphonse Sereth, I challenge you to a duel.
Everyone was stunned.
Us and ooze poured out of their mouths as their interests were piqued even more. Which went to show how significant his challenge was. A duel within Ainslark was what regulated and permitted acts of violence between two students. It was impossible to entirely ban clashes between students in a learning environment where skirmishes were inevitable. So, this system was made to ensure a safer, more organized clash. In simpler terms, the two parties would select the location and time of their fight. They were also privileged to choose what kind of battle they wanted to engage in. For some, it would be sword fights or magic battles. Scholars preferred quizzes and problem solving. In essence, what Edward had just done was to declare his intention to fight with me legally. Annabelle quickly approached Edward, closing the distance in moments, then held him by the arm.
Stop this, Ed.
Her voice was shrill, with a bit of desperation in it. She clearly cared about the conceited boy and didn't want him to create unnecessary trouble for himself. However, as expected, Edward ignored her concern and clung selfishly to his ideal. I have to do it. This guy won't learn until someone puts him in his place. While it was boorish to proceed any further and to allow the martial artist make a bigger fool of himself, I realized that this could be a good opportunity for me. My eyes darted to the clock and I realized that it was barely 2 minutes remaining before Naren re-entered the hall. This guy wasted my time. Dueling him would also eat up more time, but I soon weighed the merits and concluded that it would click his tongue while returning to his seat alongside Annabelle. In a situation whereby the disadvantaged one ended up achieving victory, it would only further be worth it. Fine, I accept your challenge. Pick the time and place, I'll pick the kind of match we'll be having. My response shocked most of the students. The magic department students looked excited since they had already witnessed a fraction of my power. As for the others, they seemed to be feeling a little confident about Edward's victory. Well, they probably know his skills as a martial artist. It didn't matter though. I was never one to choose a losing battle. There was only one possible conclusion concerning the proposed match: my overwhelming victory.
Fine.
Edward was also flustered by my sudden acceptance, as well as my conditions. It was fair and well balanced in my opinion. Allowing him to set the time and location, while I chose how we would fight, was the most reasonable approach. Still, he may have felt that I would resort to cheap tricks by forcing him into a duel involving magic proficiency rather than the combat he was good at. His fears were misplaced though. I planned on playing fair. No, I could even give myself a handicap. Let's do it at the back of the classroom by the yard. After classes end today.
Fair enough.
I nodded in agreement. As for the type of battle we'll be having, Edward's eyes narrowed at me with suspicion. I couldn't care less about his perception of me at this point, but it would prove to be a waste if the uncertainty of my choice made him run away. Don't worry, it won't be detrimental to you. After all, the true purpose of a duel was to measure the strength of both parties and judge who was superior. That would be defeated if one was at a disadvantage instead of on equal grounds. Of course, this only applies where the disadvantaged party loses. My grin grew broader as Edward clicked his tongue while returning to his seat alongside Annabelle. In a situation whereby the disadvantaged one ended up achieving victory, it would only further establish their superiority. Overwhelming and unquestionable victory. That was my goal.
This should be fun.